She had no family. He had no one left. But when their eyes met across the orphanage yard, everything changed, though neither of them knew it yet. This story unfolds in a quiet forest, where grief meets hope, and two broken lives begin to stitch themselves together in the most unexpected way. Thank you so much for watching and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you liked the story, and where you're watching from, and why you're following this. The rain pattered against the orphanage windows as 12-year-old Emma Miller sat alone on her bed, sketching in her worn notebook. Outside, the Oregon forest stretched endlessly, a green canvas that had always felt more like home than any building ever had. Emma had been at Pinewood Orphanage for as long as she could remember, watching other children come and go while she remained. Lights out in 5 minutes. Mrs. Peterson's voice echoed down the hallway. Emma sighed, closing her sketchbook and tucking it under her pillow. Another day, another disappointment. Earlier that afternoon, a couple had visited, looking to adopt. They had smiled politely at Emma, but ultimately chose a younger child, as most families did. "You're getting too old," Mrs. Peterson had told her afterward, not unkindly. "Most folks want little ones they can shape from the beginning." Emma turned to face the wall, pulling her thin blanket up to her chin. She didn't cry anymore. She'd learned long ago that tears changed nothing. Instead, she closed her eyes and imagined herself walking among the towering pines, free and belonging to no one but herself. Morning came with the sound of clattering dishes and children's voices. Emma dressed quickly in her faded jeans and oversized sweater, pushing her long brown hair behind her ears. At breakfast, she sat at the end of the table, quietly eating her oatmeal while the other children chattered excitedly. "Did you hear?" whispered Lily, a freckle-faced 9-year-old who had arrived 6 months ago. "There's a man coming today. Mrs. Peterson says he's looking for an older kid to help around his property." Emma merely nodded, refusing to let hope take root. She'd learned that lesson too many times. By mid-morning, Emma was helping in the garden when a battered blue pickup truck pulled into the driveway. She straightened up, brushing dirt from her hands as a tall man stepped out. He moved with a slight limp, his weathered face partially hidden beneath a thick beard. His flannel shirt and worn jeans marked him as someone who worked with his hands. A laborer, perhaps a farmer, or... "That's Jack Thornton," Mrs. Peterson murmured as she walked past Emma. "He's a lumberjack from up north. Lost his wife 5 years ago and his daughter last winter. Pneumonia took them both." Emma watched as the man spoke quietly with Mr. Peterson at the entrance. There was something in his eyes, a sadness that seemed to echo her own. For a moment, their gazes met across the yard, and Emma felt a strange jolt of recognition, though she was certain they had never met before. Later, Mrs. Peterson called Emma to her office. Mr. Thornton was sitting in one of the wooden chairs, his large hands clasped together, hat resting on his knee. "Emma, this is Mr. Thornton. He's looking for someone to help around his cabin and with some light bookkeeping for his lumber business." The man stood, towering over Emma. "Hello, Emma." His voice was deep but gentle. "I saw your drawings in the common room. You've got real talent." Emma blinked in surprise. No one had ever complimented her artwork before. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I live about 20 miles north, near Silver Creek. Got 40 acres, mostly forest. It's peaceful, but it gets lonely." He paused, seeming to struggle with his words. "I'm not looking to replace my daughter. No one could. But I've got room in my home and thought maybe someone like you might benefit from a change of scenery." Mrs. Peterson explained that it would be a trial period, 2 weeks to see if the arrangement suited them both. Emma listened silently, her heart beating rapidly. She didn't dare to hope, but something about Mr. Thornton's honest face and the mention of 40 acres of forest made her want to try. "Would you like that, Emma?" Mrs. Peterson asked. Emma looked up at Mr. Thornton. "Do you have trees I could draw?" The corners of his eyes crinkled slightly. "More trees than you could draw in a lifetime." And for the first time in years, Emma felt the faintest flicker of hope. "Then I'd like to try." As they drove away from the orphanage, Emma's few possessions tucked in a small bag behind the seat. She watched the building grow smaller in the side mirror. Mr. Thornton, who had asked her to call him Jack, didn't force conversation, allowing the gentle rumble of the truck's engine to fill the silence. "I'm not much of a talker," he finally said as they turned onto a narrow forest road. "My daughter Sarah, she was the chatty one. Always had something to say about everything." Emma nodded, understanding the pain behind his words. "I don't talk much either." Jack glanced at her, a look of something like relief crossing his features. "Then we'll get along just fine." As the truck wound deeper into the forest, Emma pressed her face against the window, taking in the towering trees and dappled sunlight. For the first time in her life, she was leaving the only place she'd ever known, heading toward an uncertain future with a stranger who had sadness in his eyes that matched her own. Jack Thornton's cabin stood in a small clearing, surrounded by towering Douglas firs and western hemlocks. It was larger than Emma had expected, a sturdy two-story structure with a wide porch and smoke curling from a stone chimney. As they pulled up, Emma noticed a woodshed stacked with neatly cut logs, a vegetable garden, and a workshop separate from the main house. "It's not much, but it's home," Jack said as he cut the engine. "Sarah helped me build most of it after her mother passed." Emma stepped out of the truck, breathing in the crisp forest air. "It's beautiful," she said honestly. Jack's cabin was warm and surprisingly cozy inside. The main room featured a large stone fireplace, comfortable furniture, and bookshelves lining one wall. Emma noticed framed photographs on the mantel, a woman with kind eyes and a young girl with Jack's smile. "Your room's upstairs," Jack said, leading the way. It was Sarah's. "I haven't changed much, but you can make it your own." Emma hesitated at the doorway. The room was painted a soft blue, with a handmade quilt on the bed and curtains that matched the color of the sky. A wooden desk sat beneath the window, offering a view of the forest. "I can't take her room," Emma whispered. Jack's face softened. She would have wanted someone to use it. Sarah wasn't one for letting things go to waste. He paused, then added, "If it makes you uncomfortable, I can set up the spare room downstairs." Emma shook her head. "No, it's just thank you." That evening, they ate a simple dinner of venison stew that Jack had prepared. Emma learned that he supplied timber to several construction companies in nearby towns and occasionally made custom furniture when orders were slow. "Tomorrow I'll show you around the property," he said as they washed dishes together. "There's the creek where I fish, trails through the woods, and my workshop where I do most of my carving." Emma nodded, carefully drying a bowl. "What would you like me to help with?" "Well, I'm not much for paperwork. Thought you might help organize my invoices, maybe answer phone calls when I'm out cutting. And Sarah used to tend the garden ... double quotes. His voice trailed off. "I can do that," Emma said quickly. "I helped with the garden at Pinewood." Jack nodded, seemingly relieved. "Good, that's good." That night, lying in Sarah's bed, Emma stared at the ceiling, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the forest. An owl hooted somewhere nearby, and the wind whispered through the pines. It was different from the orphanage with its creaking pipes and children's occasional cries. Here, the silence had texture and depth. Emma pulled out her sketchbook and began to draw the room, capturing the moonlight streaming through the window and the shadows it cast across the floor. For the first time in years, she felt a strange sense of peace. The next morning, Emma woke to the smell of coffee and bacon. She found Jack in the kitchen, skillfully flipping pancakes on a cast-iron griddle. "Hope you're hungry," he said, sliding a stack onto a plate. "Got a lot to show you today." After breakfast, Jack took Emma on a tour of the property. The forest was even more magnificent in daylight, with sunlight filtering through the canopy and carpeting the ground with golden patterns. Jack pointed out different tree species, showing Emma how to identify them by their bark and leaves. "This one's over 200 years old," he said, placing his hand on the trunk of a massive Douglas fir. "Was here long before any of us, and will be here long after we're gone." Emma touched the rough bark, feeling the life beneath her fingers. Do you ever feel bad? Cutting them down, I mean. Jack considered her question seriously. I only take what's needed, and I plant 3 for every one I cut. The forest gives us life, shelter, warmth, work. But we owe it respect in return. As they walked, Jack explained sustainable logging practices and how he selected trees, always considering the health of the forest as a whole. Emma listened intently, absorbing everything. At the workshop, Emma's eyes widened at the sight of Jack's creations, intricately carved furniture, bowls, and figurines that captured the essence of the forest around them. These are amazing, she breathed, running her fingers along the smooth surface of a bear carved from cedar. Jack smiled slightly, the first real smile Emma had seen from him. Sarah used to say I had magic in my hands. His smile faded. She was learning to carve too. Had a real gift for it. Emma picked up a small, unfinished carving from the workbench, the beginning of what looked like a bird in flight. Is this hers? Jack nodded, his throat working. Her last project. Never got to finish it. Without thinking, Emma said, maybe you could teach me? Not that I could ever replace her work, but... Jack was quiet for so long that Emma feared she'd overstepped. Finally he said, I'd like that, Emma. I'd like that very much. In the days that followed, Emma settled into a routine. Mornings were spent organizing Jack's paperwork and answering occasional business calls. Afternoons, she tended the vegetable garden or accompanied Jack into the forest when he needed to mark trees or collect fallen branches for his smaller carvings. In the evenings, after dinner, Jack began teaching Emma the basics of wood carving. Her artist's hands took naturally to the work, and she found herself looking forward to these quiet hours in the workshop. The only sounds the scrape of tools against wood and the occasional direction from Jack. One evening, about 10 days into her stay, Emma was helping Jack prepare dinner when he said, Mrs. Peterson will be coming tomorrow to check on how things are going. Emma froze, a carrot half peeled in her hand. She'd almost forgotten this was only a trial period, that her stay with Jack wasn't permanent. Oh, was all she could manage. Jack glanced at her, his expression unreadable. How do you think it's going, Emma? Emma looked around the kitchen, at the drawings she'd pinned to the refrigerator, at the wood shavings on her clothes from the afternoon's carving lesson, at the herbs she'd planted in small pots along the windowsill. I like it here, she said simply. I don't want to go back. Jack nodded, turning back to the venison he was seasoning. Good, because I was thinking of asking Mrs. Peterson about making this arrangement more permanent, if that's what you want. Emma's heart leapt, but years of disappointment made her cautious. You mean ... adoption? Jack set down his knife, facing her fully. I'm not looking to replace my daughter, Emma, and I don't expect you to see me as your father. But we seem to fit well together, and this place is too big for just one person. He paused. What do you think? Emma looked up at this quiet man who had opened his home and his wounded heart to her. I think I'd like to stay. Later that night, Emma stood at her bedroom window, gazing at the moon-silvered forest. For the first time in her life, she felt the stirring of something she hadn't dared to name before, belonging. Tomorrow Mrs. Peterson would come, and Emma would tell her that she had found her place, here among the ancient trees and with the gruff lumberjack who was slowly teaching her that family could be found in the most unexpected places. Mrs. Peterson's visit went better than Emma had dared to hope. The social worker seemed genuinely pleased with the arrangement, noting the positive changes in Emma's demeanor and the comfortable rapport she'd developed with Jack. I've never seen her so animated, Mrs. Peterson remarked as she watched Emma eagerly show her the small owl she'd been carving under Jack's guidance. At Pinewood, she hardly spoke to anyone. Jack nodded, his eyes following Emma as she demonstrated the carving techniques she'd learned. She's a quick study. Got a natural talent for it. After inspecting the cabin, reviewing Emma's living conditions, and having a private conversation with Emma to ensure she was happy, Mrs. Peterson sat at the kitchen table with Jack to discuss the future. You understand that formal adoption is a lengthy process, she explained. There's paperwork, home studies, background checks. I'm prepared for that, Jack interrupted gently. Emma deserves stability. I want to do this right. Mrs. Peterson smiled. In the meantime, I can extend the current fostering arrangement indefinitely. Emma can stay here while we work through the adoption process. When she delivered the news to Emma, the girl's face lit up with a smile that transformed her usually solemn features. It was the first time Jack had seen such unbridled joy on her face, and something in his chest tightened at the sight. As Mrs. Peterson drove away, Emma stood on the porch, watching until the car disappeared down the winding forest road. So, Jack said, standing beside her. Looks like you're stuck with me for a while longer. Emma looked up at him, her eyes bright. I'm not stuck. I'm home. The seasons turned, summer fading into a spectacular autumn that painted the forest in fiery hues of red and gold. Emma's sketchbooks filled with drawings of falling leaves, migrating birds, and the changing landscape around the cabin. Jack expanded his workshop, adding a small corner specifically for Emma with her own workbench and tools sized for her smaller hands. School presented a new challenge. The nearest school was 30 miles away, an impossible daily commute on the rural roads, especially in winter. After discussing options with Mrs. Peterson, they decided on a homeschooling program, supplemented by twice-weekly visits to the local library for additional resources and socialization. I was never much for book learning, Jack admitted one evening, as they reviewed Emma's curriculum together. Sarah's mother handled most of that before she passed. Emma looked up from the textbook she was studying. We can learn together, she offered. I can help with the subjects you don't like, and you can teach me about the forest and woodworking. Jack's expression softened. Seems fair. As winter approached, Jack taught Emma how to prepare for the harsh season. They gathered and stacked firewood, preserved vegetables from the garden, and made sure the generator was in working order for the inevitable power outages that came with heavy snowfall. Winter can be tough up here, Jack explained as they sealed the windows against drafts. Sometimes we get snowed in for days. I've never seen real snow, Emma admitted. At Pinewood we got a dusting sometimes, but nothing substantial. Jack looked surprised. Never built a snowman? Or had a snowball fight? Emma shook her head. Well, you're in for a treat, Jack promised. First good snow will make up for lost time. The first snow came in early December, transforming the forest into a crystalline wonderland. Emma woke to a world draped in white, the familiar landscape rendered new and magical under its pristine blanket. She pressed her face against the cold window glass, watching in wonder as flakes continued to fall from a pearl-gray sky. Downstairs, she found Jack already awake, stoking the fire and brewing coffee. Thought we'd take the day off from lessons, he said, nodding toward the window. Got some snow education to catch up on instead. After breakfast, bundled in layers of warm clothing, much of it newly purchased for her first mountain winter, Emma stepped outside into the snow. It crunched satisfyingly beneath her boots, and she laughed in delight as she took a few experimental steps. Jack showed her how to make snow angels, build the perfect snowman, and pack snowballs tight enough to fly but loose enough not to hurt when they hit their target. By midday, they were both red-cheeked and breathless, the yard transformed by their play. One more thing to show you, Jack said, disappearing into the shed and returning with an old wooden sled. This was Sarah's. Thought you might like to try it on the hill behind the cabin. Emma ran her gloved hand over the smooth wood, noting the name Sarah carved into one side. Are you sure? Jack nodded. She would have wanted someone to use it. Nothing sadder than a sled with no one to ride it. The hill provided the perfect slope, steep enough for speed, but gradual enough for safety. Jack demonstrated first, then helped Emma position herself on the sled. Hold tight to the sides, he instructed. And if you think you might hit a tree, just roll off. With a gentle push, he sent her gliding down the hillside. Emma's surprised shriek turned to laughter as she picked up speed, the cold air rushing past her face and the world blurring into streaks of white and green. When the sled finally came to a stop at the bottom, she sat for a moment, heart pounding with exhilaration, before looking back up the hill where Jack stood watching. "Again!" she called, already dragging the sled back toward the slope. They spent hours sledding until the early winter darkness began to fall, and Jack insisted they return to the warmth of the cabin. Inside, he prepared hot chocolate with marshmallows, while Emma changed into dry clothes. "Best day ever," Emma declared, warming her hands around the steaming mug. Jack smiled, the sadness that usually lingered in his eyes momentarily replaced by something lighter. Winter's just beginning. Plenty more snow days ahead. As they sat by the fire that evening, Emma working on a sketch of their snowman while Jack carved a piece of pine, she felt a contentment she'd never known before. The adoption process was moving forward, albeit slowly. Mrs. Peterson visited monthly, bringing paperwork and updates. But regardless of legal status, Emma knew she had found her place in the world, here in this cabin, with this quiet man who had opened his home and heart to her. "Jack," she said suddenly, looking up from her drawing, "why did you come to Pinewood that day? Why me?" Jack set down his carving, considering her question. "Truth is, I wasn't looking to foster or adopt anyone. I just needed help around the place." He paused, turning the piece of wood in his hands. "But then I saw your drawings in the common room, those trees you'd sketched." "They were my trees, Emma. The exact view from my workshop window." His voice grew quieter. "It was like you'd seen my world through your own eyes, before you ever set foot here." Emma remembered those drawings, the towering pines she'd imagined while lying in her bed at the orphanage, dreaming of forests she'd never seen. "And then when I saw you in the garden," Jack continued, "something just clicked. Can't explain it better than that." Emma nodded, understanding perfectly. Some connections couldn't be explained with words. As winter deepened, they fell into a comfortable routine. Mornings were for academic lessons, afternoons for practical skills like woodworking or maintaining the cabin, and evenings for reading by the fire or working on their respective projects. Jack's business slowed during the winter months, giving him more time to focus on his custom furniture and Emma's education. On particularly cold days when venturing outside wasn't possible, Jack taught Emma the traditional folk songs his grandmother had sung to him as a child. Emma's clear voice blended with his deeper one, filling the cabin with music that seemed to chase away the winter gloom. Christmas approached. The first Emma would celebrate outside the orphanage. One morning in mid-December, Jack announced they would hike into the forest to select a tree. "Usually I just cut a branch or two for decoration," he explained as they trudged through knee-deep snow. "But thought we might do a proper tree this year." Emma, following in his tracks, felt a surge of emotion at this simple acknowledgement that things were different now, that she had changed his solitary life as much as he had changed hers. They selected a small but perfectly shaped pine, and Jack showed Emma how to cut it properly, ensuring it would fit in the stand he'd made years ago. Back at the cabin, they decorated it with ornaments Jack retrieved from the attic, handmade wooden stars and angels that he and Sarah had crafted together, alongside glass baubles that had belonged to his wife. "This one was Sarah's favorite," he said softly, holding out a carved wooden bird with outstretched wings. "She made it herself when she was about your age." Emma took it carefully, noting the similarities to the unfinished piece she'd seen in the workshop months ago. "It's beautiful. You should hang it," Jack said. "I think she'd like that." As Emma placed the bird on a prominent branch, she felt a connection to the girl she had never met, but whose presence still filled the cabin in countless small ways. Not for the first time, she wondered if Sarah somehow had a hand in bringing her here, to this place where two lonely souls had found each other. On Christmas morning, Emma woke to find a wrapped package at the foot of her bed. Inside was a carved wooden box with her name inlaid in a darker wood across the lid. When she opened it, she found a complete set of professional-grade carving tools, each handle polished to a warm glow. "So you can continue learning," Jack said from the doorway where he'd been watching, "if you want to." Emma ran her fingers over the tools, recognizing the hours of work that had gone into creating them. "Did you make these?" Jack nodded. Been working on them at night after you went to bed. Emma carefully set the box aside and crossed the room to wrap her arms around Jack's waist, their first real embrace since she'd come to live with him. After a moment's hesitation, his arms came around her, strong and secure. "Thank you," she whispered against his flannel shirt, "for everything." Jack's voice was gruff with emotion when he finally spoke. "Merry Christmas, Emma." That night, as a fresh snow fell outside and the fire crackled in the hearth, Emma realized that for the first time in her life, she was no longer counting days, no longer waiting for something better to come along. She was exactly where she belonged. Spring came late to the mountains, but when it arrived, it transformed the landscape with explosive vigor. Snow melted into rushing streams, wildflowers carpeted the forest floor, and the trees burst into new growth, their tender green leaves unfurling toward the strengthening sun. For Emma, now 13, the changing season brought a milestone, nearly a year since she had first arrived at Jack's cabin. The adoption process, slowed by bureaucratic delays and the isolated location, was finally nearing completion. Mrs. Peterson had informed them during her last visit that the final court date was scheduled for early June. "Just a few more weeks," Jack said one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. "Then it's official." Emma nodded, her fingers absently tracing the grain of the wooden railing. Do you think your wife and Sarah would have approved of me being here?" Jack was quiet for a long moment, his weathered face thoughtful in the fading light. "Carolyn, my wife, she had the biggest heart of anyone I've ever known. And Sarah ... His voice softened at his daughter's name. "Sarah always wanted a sister." Emma felt a lump form in her throat. Over the months, Jack had gradually shared more stories about his family. Caroline's love of gardening, which explained the extensive vegetable patch Emma now tended. Sarah's infectious laugh and her passion for climbing trees despite her mother's protests. Through these stories, Emma had formed a picture of the family that had once filled the cabin with life, and sometimes in quiet moments she could almost feel their presence, not in a ghostly way, but in the love that had shaped the home she now shared with Jack. "I've been thinking," Jack said, interrupting her thoughts. "After the adoption, if you want, we could make it legal for you to take our last name. But only if you want to," he added hastily. "No pressure either way." Emma looked out at the forest, considering his words. Her current name, Miller, was one the orphanage had assigned her when she was found abandoned as an infant. It held no connection to any family, no link to her unknown past. "I'd like that," she said finally. "Emma Thornton sounds right." Jack's smile was brief but genuine. "It does at that." As the court date approached, Emma found herself increasingly anxious. What if something went wrong? What if some previously unknown relative suddenly appeared to claim her? What if the judge decided Jack's remote cabin wasn't a suitable home for a young girl? Jack noticed her growing tension. "Something on your mind?" he asked one afternoon as they worked side by side in the garden, preparing the soil for summer. Planting. Emma dug her trowel into the earth with more force than necessary. "What if they say no? What if they don't let me stay?" Jack set down his tools and turned to face her fully. "Emma, look at me." She reluctantly met his gaze. "No matter what any court says, this is your home now. I'm not letting anyone take you away, understand?" The fierce certainty in his voice steadied her. Jack Thornton was a man of few words, but when he made a promise, it was as solid as the ancient trees that surrounded them. "Besides," he added with a hint of a smile, "Mrs. Peterson is on our side, and I wouldn't want to be the judge who crosses that woman." The day before their court appearance, a thunderstorm swept through the mountains, bringing torrential rain that turned the dirt road to their cabin into a muddy, impassable quagmire. "No way we're getting the truck through that," Jack said grimly, as they surveyed the damage the next morning. The court was in the county seat, over 60 miles away, and their appointment was for 2 p.m. Emma felt panic rising in her chest. "What do? We can't miss it." Jack checked his watch, his brow furrowed in concentration. If we leave now, we can hike to the main road. About 5 miles. I'll call Bill Johnson to pick us up there. He owes me a favor. 5 miles? Emma repeated. In the mud? Jack was already heading back to the cabin. Better get changed. Wear your good clothes and a backpack. We'll clean up when we get there. The hike was every bit as challenging as Emma had feared. The forest trails were slick, with mud and debris from the storm, requiring careful navigation to avoid falls. Jack led the way, occasionally reaching back to offer a steadying hand when the path grew particularly treacherous. Despite their early start, the difficult conditions slowed their progress. By the time they reached the main road, it was nearly noon, and there was no sign of Bill Johnson. He'll be here, Jack assured her, though Emma noticed him checking his watch with increasing frequency. When Bill's truck finally appeared, it was almost 12:30. The drive to the county seat would take at least an hour, leaving them precious little time to clean up before the hearing. Step on it, Bill, Jack said as they climbed into the cab, mud-splattered and exhausted. We've got an important date with a judge. They arrived at the courthouse with 15 minutes to spare. Mrs. Peterson was waiting anxiously on the steps, her relief visible when she spotted them hurrying toward her. What happened to you two? She exclaimed, taking in their disheveled appearance. Storm washed out the road, Jack explained. Had to hike out. Is there somewhere Emma can clean up a bit? Mrs. Peterson hustled Emma to the women's restroom while Jack headed to the men's. In record time, Emma changed into the clean clothes she'd carried in her backpack, washed the mud from her face and hands, and attempted to tame her wind-tangled hair. You look fine, Mrs. Peterson assured her, helping to straighten her collar. The important thing is that you're here. The courtroom was smaller than Emma had imagined, with wooden benches and an American flag standing beside the judge's bench. Jack, now somewhat more presentable in a clean flannel shirt and the least muddy of his jeans, sat beside her, his knee bouncing slightly, the only outward sign of his nervousness. When the judge entered, a white-haired woman with keen eyes and a no-nonsense expression, everyone stood. As the proceedings began, Emma found herself holding her breath, releasing it only when Jack placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. The judge reviewed their file thoroughly, asking Jack several questions about his ability to provide for Emma, his plans for her education, and his understanding of the responsibilities of adoptive parenthood. Jack answered clearly and honestly, his deep voice steady despite the importance of the moment. Then the judge turned her attention to Emma. Young lady, I'd like to hear from you. Are you happy in Mr. Thornton's home? Do you wish for this adoption to proceed? Emma stood, her heart pounding, looking at Jack, this quiet, steadfast man who had opened not just his home, but his wounded heart to her. She found the courage to speak. Double quotes, yes, Your Honor. More than anything. She hesitated, then added, Jack taught me that family isn't just about blood. It's about belonging, and I belong with him. The judge's stern expression softened slightly. She looked between them, seeming to note the mud still visible on their shoes, the evidence of their determined journey to reach the courthouse on time. Well, she said finally, it's not every day I see this level of commitment to making the court date. She signed the document before her with a flourish. Petition for adoption granted. Congratulations, Miss Thornton. Mr. Thornton. Court is adjourned. The drive back to the cabin was quiet, both Emma and Jack too overwhelmed by the day's events for much conversation. Bill Johnson left them at the junction where the main road met their private drive, now passable though still muddy. As they walked the final stretch toward home, Emma spotted something that made her stop in her tracks. A rainbow arched across the sky, its vibrant colors spanning the valley and seeming to end right at their cabin. Look, she said, pointing. Jack stood beside her, following her gaze. Would you look at that? He murmured. Do you think it's a sign? Emma asked softly. Jack considered this, his face solemn. My grandmother used to say that rainbows were bridges between what was lost and what was found. He glanced down at Emma. Seems fitting today. They continued walking, the rainbow illuminating their path home. Emma Thornton, officially legally Emma Thornton now, felt a sense of completion that had eluded her entire life. The orphaned girl with no past had found a future in this forest, with this man who had lost so much yet still found room in his heart for her. That evening, after dinner, Jack presented Emma with a small wooden box, similar to the one he'd given her at Christmas, but more intricately carved. "Made this for you. For today," he explained as she opened it. Inside lay a pendant, a miniature carving of two trees growing side by side, their branches intertwined as they reached toward the sky. The piece was suspended on a leather cord, polished to a warm glow. "The big one's me," Jack said, suddenly, seeming self-conscious. "The smaller one's you." Growing together. Emma lifted it carefully, running her finger over the delicate carving. "It's perfect," she whispered, immediately slipping it over her head. Jack cleared his throat. "There's something else I want to show you." He led her to his workshop, where he unlocked a drawer he'd never opened in her presence before. From it, he withdrew a small, unfinished carving, the bird that Sarah had been working on before her. "Illness, been thinking," he said, turning the piece in his hands. "Sarah would have wanted it finished. But it shouldn't be me who does it." He held it out to Emma. "Thought maybe you might want to complete it. When you're ready." Emma accepted the carving with trembling hands, understanding the magnitude of what Jack was entrusting to her. This wasn't just a piece of wood. It was a connection, a continuation, a passing of something precious from the daughter he had lost to the daughter he had found. "I'll be careful with it," she promised. "I'll make it beautiful." Jack nodded, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "I know you will." Later that night, Emma stood at her bedroom window, looking out at the forest bathed in moonlight. The trees that had once seemed mysterious and forbidding now felt like guardians, witnesses to the unlikely journey that had brought her to this place, to this family of two. She touched the pendant at her throat, feeling the smooth contours of the intertwined trees beneath her fingers. From orphan to daughter, from alone to belonging, the transformation seemed as miraculous as the rainbow that had welcomed them home. In the years since she had first arrived at Jack's cabin, both their lives had changed in ways neither could have imagined. The lumberjack who had lost his family and the girl who had never had one had somehow found in each other exactly what they needed. Not replacements for what was lost, but something new and equally precious. Emma turned from the window and climbed into bed, no longer Sarah's bed but truly her own now. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new lessons, new memories to create. But whatever came, she would face it secure in the knowledge that she was Emma Thornton now, daughter of Jack, carver of wood, drawer of trees, and no longer alone in the world.